Driving a culture of innovation, as Vanessa mentioned at Deloitte, also means building innovative products that can deliver innovative solutions both internally and to our clients. Um, Speaking of product and innovative products for that matter, in the next few minutes, Renai and I are going to talk about Hunter.ai, which is our platform that delivers innovation in assessing real-time risk. And in particular, we're going to touch up on how this helps with internal controls and some of the regulatory risk sensing. Um, Traditionally, these modules tend to be more sample-based. They tend to be more manual. When you're looking at an organization, when you're looking at testing of the controls, traditional approaches seem to rely on a sample of problems, a sample of controls to be tested, and a lot of manual intervention. Data also predominantly sits in silos, which makes it very tedious to be able to have access to various components and needs a lot of manual intervention to be able to run some tests, to be able to see what's happening within your organization, whether your internal controls are functioning properly, whether the processes that are put in place are going to work as expected. Fast forward to today, using innovative solutions like Hunter.ai, we're actually able to use cutting edge technology such as data analytics and artificial intelligence to harness the entire population of data. And we're talking about both structured and unstructured data to be able to continuously monitor the risk within an organization. Not only that, we're also able to dynamically assess behavior of our clients, our staff, and our processes within the organization. And also, we're moving away from traditional red flag testing to more of a diverse and unsupervised analysis of anomalies in patterns, which means we're using non-conventional data, we're using third-party data, we're using data that's accessible to us, including social media and etc. And what's wonderful about Hunter.ai is that it actually covers across various departments and various modules, including procurement lifecycle, HR and payroll, customer onboarding, and also looking at transaction monitoring. In the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about the actual platform. So what started within our highly experimental unit a couple of years ago as something that we use for internal controls testing is now a full-fledged product, a platform that is configurable, that not only we use internally to support our internal controls and compliance project, and we support our internal audit, but also our clients themselves can actually implement this within their organization to be able to use this in a 24-hour, 7 days a week without any manual intervention in that manner. So what I would like to do is to actually break down some of these modules that are available in Hunter. So Hunter.ai, as I mentioned, is a platform that can speak to the requirements of many different roles within the organization. We have modules like compliance, government, and regulation, which we can look at the specific regulation and obligations that you're supposed to meet, so that the chief audit executive can utilize that module to be able to understand if they're meeting regulatory compliance. You can also use that for customer onboarding. For example, in FSI, especially financial service industry and the telco industry, the rules and regulations are constantly changing, and they're very stringent and strict regulations in terms of how you can onboard your customers. There are specific documents that needs to be verified. For example, when you're onboarding a customer, in particular in this part of the world, in West Africa, for example, when you're a telco user, when you are onboarding your customers, you need to be able to verify their ID documents. You need to understand whether they have registered other SIM cards, or if you're trying to open a bank account, you need to be able to prove who you are. Traditionally, you would need to send your passport, and you need to go in the line and you need to queue up to show your documents. However, using our KYC module for Hunter, we can actually utilize face recognition to be able to automatically understand whether your passport is matching with the regulatory database that you have your photos on, etc. And we're able to automatically read through your utility bills to make sure your address is verified, so that these things happen within minutes, and it ends up being a great service to our customers, as opposed to having to queue up in the branch to be able to do some of these things. We also have modules that can do behavioral anomalies. So you're actually able to look at your customers and see whether some of these behaviors are matching with their usual pattern. And you're actually able to pick out certain anomalies that may not be, that may be indicative of fraud. In the same matter, you can look at the head of human resources is able to look at and identify any employee activities to see whether that could be a potential fraud indication. But at the same time, you're also able to look at your employees to see whether there are any incentives that you need to put in place, given the climate that we live in, given the attrition that happens. Are you actually able to see how engaged your employees are? So you can look at this for risk internally or externally. And now bringing back to our platform, you can see that it is a one-stop shop that you can pick different modules from, depending on your role, where it's able to streamline the collection of all of the data from various resources, including structured data that may sit in your core banking application or your core systems, unstructured data that could be sitting in your social media sites, and also third-party data that you might be bringing or looking at various other risk factors. Bring it all in one place, put it all in one platform, and then return these data into meaningful, reusable objects that each of these components that they can then pick and choose from. And as a result of this, you're able to deliver output in various shapes and forms that can meet the requirements of the chief audit executive, the procurement officials, head of human resources, etc. And that might mean Excel reports, that might mean automated emails and triggers to notify of non-compliance, that could be in interactive dashboards, both real-time and scheduled. I will now hand over to my colleague Renai, who will talk to you about a specific example, a real-time use case where Hunter.ai platform was used.
That walkthrough.
Thank you.
What I'm going to talk about now is a real-life example. We've anonymized the data, obviously, but of a use case which we ran through the platform. So this was one of the big telcos in Africa, and we're busy implementing the solution for them across their different operating countries. So far, we've done it in 3 operating countries, and we're busy deploying it in the next 2 operating countries. So their problem statement was around subscriber onboarding or customer onboarding. So from an Africa context, there's a lot of regulation that comes with onboarding. You have to collect specific information at point of onboarding. I think the biggest thing is around being able to hand-to-heart verify that the person that you've onboarded is the actual person who's going to use the SIM card. There's a lot of nuances that come with that. But over the past couple of years, that particular telco had gotten a couple of fines that were extensive, and they just wanted to make sure that they understand who they are onboarding, and they understand the risk of the people that they actually are onboarding. So they approached us, and we recommended to them that let's use the Hunter.ai platform to actually do that verification at point of onboarding, but to also assist you with monitoring of the customers, subscribers that you've onboarded, but also the agents that are doing the onboarding, so that we can start understanding the behavior of how people are onboarding and be able to pick up any risk within that onboarding process. So a particular example that I've chosen is to speak in particular about the persona component. If you can see on the screen there, those different AI models or analytics configurable services. There's one component in there that's called personas. And what essentially personas are groupings of behavioral risk for different actors. In this case, our actors were agents. So we wanted to understand, after we've done all the subscriber onboarding, we understand if we have all the information or not, what is the actual behavior of those agents who are doing the onboarding. And this goes to a point that Yanya mentioned initially around the multiple exceptions. The reason why personas is so important, you'll see just now, it gives you that high level behavioral groupings of these are my risk groups that I need to focus on, rather than focusing on it on an exception by exception basis. If we focused on it that way, you'd probably have like 1,000, 2,000 exceptions. Where do you actually start? Where does your risk lie? But using this persona approach or this persona component, we're able to risk group those agents into different buckets. Now, let me walk you through this this example. So this was an actual case of persona groupings that we actually identified in one of the OPCOs. The beauty about this, or the beauty about using AI, is that it would take us forever to figure out what the different behavioral groupings are. So this is where we use machine learning to help us with the segmentation so that we can create those risk groupings. The ones in particular that I want to focus on is a very high risk group that we identified and a low risk group that we identified. So starting off with a low risk group there, there's right at the bottom there about 4,000 of the agents. We identified them as ideal ahomas. So the name themselves, the name we give the name, that's the fun that we get to have, but the machine helps us with actual grouping. So ideal ahomas was a group of agents who they might fail one or two exceptions here and there, but predominantly they actually fine. From an onboarding point of view, they seem to be fine. Most of the customers that they onboard are not failing any exceptions. They don't have any behavioral issues that we pick up, maybe one or two here and there. One of the other groupings that we actually identified, which had about 500 or so agents and was very interesting to us, was patriotic Patricia. And what was so significant about this risk grouping or the behavior of these agents was that when they onboard customers, they always have multiple SIM cards registered to one ID number or to one subscriber. So I myself, Renai, whenever they onboard me, the pattern was that within a short space of time, they're going to onboard 5, 6, 7 SIM cards against my name. That was the distinct behavior that we recognized, or the machine was able to identify for us. And we'll go through an example of what we mean just now about a patriotic Patricia. On the right-hand side, that chart, what that's just showing was what this persona bit also enables you to do is to actually compare different groupings or risk groupings to understand them better, so that if you want to do any interventions, if you want to hone in on a particular persona group, you can actually compare to see what are the key behavioral differences between those groupings and what do I need to focus on to get that risk grouping into an ideal agent. The example that we're showing there, it's just comparing, for this example, your ideal agents, which are in green, and then your patriotic Patricia, which is in the yellow bit. And you can see the extent or the vast exceptions that the patriotic Patricia fail as compared to your ideal grouping. So if you want to do any interventions from an ideal, from a patriotic Patricia point of view, you know exactly that you need to be targeting certain key features or certain key attributes about that grouping. Let me actually walk you through an example of how the platform or the machine is able to identify such personas. So I'll walk you through one example of an agent who was identified as a patriotic Patricia. Cool. So let's actually look at this anonymized example of a Tandy. Tandy is a subscriber that was onboarded on a particular day. Now, from a reg perspective, which is one of the components that we run, this looked like a very legit onboarding and there was nothing wrong with it. So the name and all the regulatory details were captured. Like we verified the name seems to be a proper name. The surname is fine, the ID number is fine, the address actually checks out. So it looks like a legit onboarding. So what was actually the issue, or where does Patriotic Patricia come in? Let's look at the onboarding journey. At around that particular time on that day, Tandy gets onboarded, and the agent who onboarded Tandy is Philip. The address that was provided and a whole lot of other information, but here we're picking out address, 1 Smith Street, and it was a successful onboarding. As I said, from a reg perspective and what the system has been configured to look at for, it was actually checking out, so that's fine. Then what happens? What actually happens is 4 minutes later, there's a second SIM registration by the same agent, but the address that's given now is completely different. I mean, 4 minutes later, the same person you're onboarding, how can the address change in 4 minutes? That's like almost impossible. However, it's a successful registration. A couple of minutes later, there's a third SIM registration. It's the same agent. They provide a completely different address. Again, it's a successful registration. A couple of minutes later, there's another SIM that's registered for the same subscriber. It's the same agent, a different address is provided. 2 days later, another SIM is registered. You can start seeing the pattern now. And upon further investigation with the team, what we actually found was the issue, or this issue that we picked up when they went to investigate on the ground. What was happening was what we call pre-registration of SIM cards. So in that particular OPCO, when you register a SIM card, a physical person, or they do a liveliness check, a person needs to be standing in front of the agent. They take a picture and all those details so that they can issue the SIM card. What the agents were doing, they found a way to actually bypass that by pre-registering SIM cards without the customer knowing. So they would say to a customer, oh, your first registration was unsuccessful. Maybe there's a network glitch. Can we try again? Oh, no, it didn't go through. The system rejected it. Can we try again? So they register a whole lot of SIM cards without the customer knowing. The other, I'd say 3-4 SIM cards, they would then go and sell it in the black market, and they would only give you the final registered SIM card as a customer without you actually knowing about it. And who knows what those other 3-4 SIM cards would have been used for, I mean, in the black market where they sell it. And I mean, all of this kind of behavior is firstly behavior that the client was not really, the client didn't really know about, because they were worried more about am I meeting the minimum regulatory requirements? But how we were actually also able to pick this up is using those different components within the Hunter platform to ultimately run our persona model and determine what the behaviors are. So this one, I think the key components that we used to identify such behavior was the regulatory component, the process component, and our behavioral component. But this example that I wanted to walk you through is just to show you within the platform, the type of things that you'll be able to do, the type of risks that you could be able to identify in the different use cases. This was just one onboarding use case. There's multiple use cases: procurement, HR and payroll, transaction monitoring, and a whole lot of other use cases where you're able to pick up these niche risks that are very directed, and it leads you to actually prioritize what type of risks do I want to focus on first, and so forth. Now, the next question is, this is all great to do this maybe on your local machine, to do this on an ad hoc basis. But how do you actually productionalize something like this at scale? How do you run this real time so that you're able to give clients benefit or benefit in a quicker manner. For that, I'll hand over to Quinton, who's going to take us through ML ops and how we actually productionalize our solutions.